Dad isn't dead. He's under the floor, the little girl said. Police started digging. Chief Mark Rivers looked up from the incident report that had just been handed to him. Name of the reporting party: Martha Grant. Content: missing husband. No trace. No additional notes. But what caught his attention was that the person who came to file the report wasn't Martha. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Frances Davis, and with her, a 4-year-old girl tightly clutching a teddy bear, her face pale as paper. She didn't want me to take the little girl anywhere, Frances said, her voice urgent. But the girl, she said something strange. You need to hear it. Mark sat down, his expression softening as he looked toward the child. What's your name, sweetheart? I'm Anna, the girl replied, her voice barely a whisper. Do you know where your daddy went? He asked gently. Anna didn't respond right away. She looked up, her large dark eyes trembling. Then, slowly, she said, Daddy is under the kitchen floor. The air in the room turned ice cold. Mark glanced at Frances. Her face had gone pale. A young officer nearby coughed, trying to hide a shiver. What did you say? Mark leaned in, his tone no longer soft but careful. Daddy's under the kitchen floor, Anna repeated. Where the tiles are a lighter color. Daddy's really cold. An eerie silence fell over the room. Mark immediately signaled to Lieutenant Richard Monroe to step forward. Get Martha Grant to the station. Set up a preliminary investigation team. I want the scene checked within the hour. Less than 30 minutes later, Martha arrived, far more composed and dry-eyed than Mark had expected. She wore a white blouse and black pants. Her hair was neatly tied. Her eyes showed no sign of panic or grief. I've told you already, Martha said calmly. My husband Julian has a habit of disappearing for a few days without warning. This isn't the first time. You didn't find anything unusual about that? Mark asked, not taking his eyes off her. No, she said with a shrug. I figured he'd come back, like he always does, Richard interjected. But neighbors said they heard arguing and things breaking that night. Martha glanced at him, then sighed. We had an argument. But who doesn't argue in a marriage? Mark nodded. And did you renovate the kitchen floor recently? Martha paused slightly. I retiled the floor. Because there was mold. I did it myself. You retiled it yourself? Mark asked, surprised. Yes, Martha replied quickly. I watched tutorials online. Richard pulled out a USB drive. Your neighbor, Mr. Ernest Morgan, has a security camera. He provided footage showing you carrying Anna out of the house around 3 a.m. and returning alone with a bag of construction materials. Care to explain? Martha bit her lip. I didn't want Anna breathing in the mold. I took her to a friend's house. As for the materials, I wanted to fix the house myself. Mark raised an eyebrow. No receipt for the materials, no contractor, no official notice of repair. And the girl says her father is under the kitchen tiles. Quite the coincidence. Martha clenched her fists, her voice rising. Are you accusing me of killing my husband? Mark replied calmly. We're not accusing anyone. We're asking questions. And your answers don't seem to line up. Martha suddenly turned to Richard. You're an investigator. But do you know anything about an unhappy marriage? Do you know Julian used to hit me? Mark cut in. Do you have any proof? Medical records? Hospital visits? Police reports? Martha was silent for a few seconds, then exhaled sharply. I didn't go to the hospital. I endured it. Richard tilted his head slightly toward Mark and whispered, We need an emergency search warrant. The cement smell is still fresh. And her tone. Mark nodded. Start the paperwork. I want forensics there first thing in the morning. The next morning, officers arrived at the small house at the end of Maplewood Street. The lead forensic officer, Lisa Parker, a cold but seasoned professional, knelt down and sniffed the newly laid tiles. Cement still smells fresh, not fully dry. There's something underneath, she said, then turned to another technician. Start drilling at the discolored area. Martha was held in the living room, watched by 2 officers. Anna wasn't present. Frances had taken her to her grandmother's, as Mark had requested. Lisa pointed. We'll drill layer by layer. Start at the light-colored tiles. The whir of the drill echoed through the heavy air. About 30 minutes later, the first layer of tiles was removed. Beneath the gray mortar, a piece of dark fabric began to show. Lisa stopped. A technician looked up. Slow down. Use your hands for this part. Wearing gloves, they gently cleared away the cement. A young officer gasped. Oh my God! A human foot emerged, pale, blue, and stiff. Mark stepped forward, silent for a few moments, then turned to Martha. Anything you'd like to say? Martha didn't. She turned her face away. Lisa's voice was heavy. Male body, fully wrapped in fabric. Dried blood on the head. Blunt force trauma. Richard snapped photos of the scene, then crouched to pick up a small shattered object next to the body. It's a phone. Cracked. But we might recover the data. Mark narrowed his eyes. Do it. Send it to tech. Another officer ran outside and vomited. Lisa didn't comment. Not everyone's built for death, she said quietly. Mark looked down at the body, eyes still open, fists clenched as if he had struggled. He turned and glanced at the silent house, the curtains swaying in the light breeze. This isn't a disappearance, not an accident. This is a premeditated murder. He turned to Richard. Arrest Martha Grant. Hold her under Section 142, suspected murder and body disposal. Richard stepped forward and read her rights. Mrs. Martha Grant, you are under arrest for suspicion of murder. You have the right to remain silent. Martha scoffed bitterly. Do you know how many years I've lived in silence? Mark replied plainly. Well, no one needs silence anymore. The clink of handcuffs echoed through the cement-dusted room. Martha didn't resist. She only glanced at the tiles, now removed, where her husband's body had just been uncovered. Her gaze was hollow, as if she had nothing left to hold on to. On the transport back to the detention center, Richard glanced in the rearview mirror. Martha sat motionless, like a statue. He thought to himself, some commit crimes in a fit of rage, but others, like Martha, seem to orchestrate a full-blown tragedy. Back at the station, Mark called for an emergency meeting. Present were the forensics team, data recovery techs, and prosecutor Rose Martin, a sharp woman with eyes like blades. Lisa Parker spoke first. The victim, Julian Grant, died of blunt force trauma to the skull from behind. No signs of defensive wounds. No blood at the burial site, indicating the body was moved before burial. Mark nodded. This was clearly premeditated murder. Rose folded her hands. But for a solid prosecution, we need all the puzzle pieces: motive, timeline, physical evidence. The girl Anna is key, but a child's words aren't enough. We need more. A young tech officer, Stephen Harris, stood and presented. We're recovering data from the broken phone. Most of the memory is gone, but a few texts survived before it powered off. He projected them on the screen. A message thread between Julian and Martha appeared. Julian, Martha, I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce next week. Martha, if you leave me, I'll make you disappear. Julian, don't be crazy. Think of Anna. Martha, Anna will be fine without you. She and I will live better. The room fell silent. Rose frowned. That's enough to prove motive. Mark signaled to Richard. Send the investigation team back to Martha's house. Look for property papers, loan documents, anything that shows financial motivation. 2 hours later, Richard returned with a box of documents. He pulled out a stack. This is the property deed. Julian was the sole owner. We found evidence Martha was trying to transfer ownership by claiming he was missing. He pulled out another bundle. These are loan receipts. Nearly $240,000 borrowed from Julian under the pretext of a small personal business investment. No repayment made. Mark looked at Rose. Add financial motive to the threat, the scene. That's more than enough. Not done yet, Richard added. We discovered frequent private messages between Martha and a man named Samuel Brooks on social media. Mark tapped the table. I want to speak with that man. That afternoon, Samuel Brooks, a tall man with neatly combed hair and a dark shirt, was brought into the interrogation room. He looked nervous, eyes darting. How do you know Martha Grant? Rose asked directly. Samuel swallowed. We met in an investment group, talked online, met a few times. Were you romantically involved with her? Mark asked. Samuel hesitated. I had feelings, but nothing improper happened. She always said her husband was terrible, that she was tired of being controlled. Did she ever talk about hurting him? Richard asked. Samuel took a deep breath. One time she said, I wish he would just disappear. But I thought it was just venting. Rose repeated the words. Do you think Martha is impulsive? Samuel fell silent. No, she's more calculated than I thought. Meanwhile, at the home of Carol, Julian's mother, little Anna sat by the window drawing quietly. Carol placed a glass of milk beside her. What are you drawing, sweetheart? She asked gently. Anna pointed at the paper, a human figure lying beneath a tiled floor, surrounded by stacked tiles. It's Daddy. He's under there. Carol gripped the edge of the table, her voice trembling. Who told you about that? I heard it, Anna said, still focused on her drawing. Mommy had a big pan. Daddy said, don't. And she hit him hard. Then Daddy stopped talking. Carol shuddered, trying to stay calm. And then? Mommy said, don't tell anyone. If you do, our family will fall apart. Carol buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. In the interrogation room, Rose concluded, Martha didn't just kill someone. She staged a fake home repair, created a false alibi by removing the child, and coached the girl into silence. That makes this crime even more severe. Mark nodded. I'll recommend charges for premeditated murder, concealment of a body, and manipulating a minor into withholding testimony. She must face the full consequences. Richard added, not just for Julian, but for Anna. That child has been living in lies and violence since the age of 4. Rose checked her watch. Prepare for the preliminary hearing. I want every piece of evidence organized. And remember, Anna's words may not be admissible as formal testimony, but they are the emotional linchpin. Mark stood up, his voice somber. We're not just seeking justice for the dead. We're trying to save a living soul, one already scarred. On the way back to Carol's house, Frances asked softly, Do you think Anna really understands everything? Carol shook her head, her eyes red. She's just a child. But the saddest thing is, when a child understands too much, and no one lets her speak. Frances choked up. I've never seen a child so calm, yet so full of pain. When Anna said, Daddy's cold, I got chills. Carol squeezed Frances's hand. I'll protect that child, no matter what. That evening, Mark reviewed the case file. He opened a photo of Anna drawing by the window, her face unnaturally serious for her age. He sighed. "Some people bury a body after killing," he murmured. "Some bury their child's entire childhood." He looked out the station window, the dim glow of night spilling over Maplewood Street. Tomorrow, the case would officially move into prosecution. The cement had dried, but the blood would never disappear. The next morning, under the biting cold sunlight of suburban Illinois, the forensic team and tactical police gathered around the house at 17 Maplewood Street. Once a quiet residence, the house was now surrounded by yellow tape, curious neighbors whispering behind curtains, and a line of service vehicles parked along the narrow street. Lisa Parker, the lead forensic investigator, adjusted her rubber gloves, her steely eyes scanning the kitchen floor. She signaled to two team members. "Begin drilling through the newly tiled area." Part of the floor had been examined the previous day, but this time they would demolish the entire 40-centimeter-thick cement base at the exact location Anna had pointed out. The saw winded sharply. Tiles shattered into shards. A harsh, acrid odor began to rise from beneath, thickening the air. Detective Richard Monroe wrinkled his nose and took a step back. "Decomposition smell," Lisa confirmed, her voice even, unflinching. "Everyone step back. Hazmat team, move in." Forensic tech Thomas Daniels slid a crowbar into the cement's edge. Within 10 minutes, damp earth started to appear beneath. "Careful," Lisa warned. "We have signs of a buried object. Dig by hand." The scratching of small shovels echoed in the silence. Layer by layer, fine dirt was lifted out. Sweat beaded down Thomas's face, though it was only about 65 degrees Fahrenheit inside the house. Suddenly, he froze, his hand trembling. "Something's here." "I touched fabric." Lisa immediately leaned down, shining her flashlight onto the soil. "Stop. Clear the surrounding dirt. Gently." Everyone seemed to hold their breath. After nearly 10 minutes of careful excavation, the edge of a large burlap sack appeared, dark, crumpled, and blotched with deep red stains resembling dried blood. Richard stepped back, hand instinctively resting on his holstered gun, though he knew nothing alive remained beneath that earth. "Get a fabric sample. Open the bag," Lisa said, her voice low but firm. As the zipper was pulled open, a wave of putrid air burst out. Thomas turned and vomited violently into the kitchen corner. Another officer clamped a hand over his mouth, face pale. Inside the bag, a man's body lay curled tightly, forced into the narrow space. His head was soaked in dried blood, a deep indentation at the temple, clear evidence of a blunt force strike from behind. Mark stepped in, stopping cold at the sight of the face, distorted by decay, but still unmistakable. Julian Grant. "The girl was right," he murmured. Richard stepped forward, hands trembling as he snapped photos, fighting off waves of nausea. Lisa crouched beside the body, pulling out a small evidence pouch near the torso. "A broken phone," she said quietly. "Send it to tech. Recover everything," Mark ordered, eyes locked on the corpse. Lisa nodded. "The body's been dead at least 72 hours. No restraints. Fatal blow to the skull, consistent with a sudden strike from behind. Blood pooled at the back and collar. He was likely standing when hit, then collapsed, and bagged." Richard jotted notes. "So, Julian never had a chance to fight back. Quick death." "No defensive wounds on the hands," Lisa added. "Left hand still clenched, likely a final reflex before unconsciousness." Another forensic tech, James Morgan, peeled back the remaining burlap. He flinched. A digital watch was still strapped to the wrist. Its screen cracked, the display frozen at 2:42 a.m. Lisa leaned in. "Could be time of death." Matches the exterior footage of Martha leaving the house with Anna. Mark turned to Richard. Call Rose. Tell her to prepare the indictment. This is a clear-cut murder case. Nothing left to debate. At the central holding facility, Martha Grant sat on a narrow metal bed, staring blankly through the barred window. The door opened. Rose Martin entered, holding a thick case file. "Do you have anything to say?" she asked bluntly. "No," Martha replied, her voice hollow. "We've excavated the kitchen floor. Julian's body was there, a dark fabric sack, blood, a blow to the head, a broken phone, a watch frozen at the moment you walked your daughter out of that house." Rose's tone was unwavering. "Nothing to add?" Martha gave a faint, bitter smile. "I guess you're happy to be right." Rose leaned in. "I don't need to be right. I need the truth. And you need to decide if you're a murderer or a victim." Martha stood and slowly began pacing the cell. Without turning, she said, "Julian said he was leaving me. He said he'd take Anna. I couldn't let that happen." Rose narrowed her eyes. "You're admitting you killed your husband." Silence. "You planned everything. Taking your daughter away as an alibi, buying cement, retiling the floor. This wasn't rage. This was cold. Calculated. He drove me mad," Martha whispered. "I felt like a ghost. If I hadn't struck first, I would have disappeared." Rose's voice turned ice. "You could have left, reported him, fought through the courts. But instead, you chose murder. And you buried him beneath the floor where your daughter plays every morning." Martha clenched her fists. Her voice was sharp, defiant. "I don't regret it." In the digital forensics room, technician Stephen Harris sat at his desk, eyes fixed on a loading bar. A short video clip had just been extracted from the shattered phone, only 38 seconds long. But it was damning. Mark and Richard stood behind him. The footage appeared. Grainy nighttime camera feed, positioned high in the kitchen corner. Julian stood facing Martha, a small suitcase at his feet. "Martha, I'm leaving." His voice rang out, firm. "My lawyer will contact you in the morning." "You're not going anywhere," Martha replied, voice low. "I don't want Anna to see this. Don't make things worse." Julian turned away. Martha picked up an object, a cast-iron pan. She moved toward him. The video cut to black. Stephen's voice trembled. "That's all. That's the whole clip." Mark clenched his fists. "We have everything we need. Now, we wait for trial." That night, Carol cradled Anna in her arms. The child had finally fallen asleep after a nightmare, her hair damp with cold sweat. Carol whispered, "Your dad will have his voice heard, and you will live like a child again, not a witness to a crime." Outside, the rain began to fall, light but cold, and beneath the floor tiles that had been torn away, the kitchen now stood empty. But the memory of death lingered, soaked into every tile, every seam of grout, like the final breath of a man betrayed. The air inside the courthouse was suffocating. Martha Grant was led in, wearing a gray prison uniform. Her once styled hair hung in tired strands, her face pale, eyes shadowed. There was still defiance in her gaze, but fatigue had dulled its edges. Across the room stood Prosecutor Rose Martin, her expression sharp, her presence cold and unflinching. Beside her sat Detective Mark Rivers and Investigator Richard Monroe. On the public benches, Carol sat quietly, gripping Anna's hand. The little girl sat still beside her, her eyes wide, obedient, watching. Rose stood. "Mrs. Grant, today you have the opportunity to tell the truth. This is your final chance to explain your actions. If you remain silent, we proceed with the full charge of first-degree murder." Martha gave a bitter smile. The truth? She echoed. Since when do the ones wearing handcuffs get the privilege of telling their side? Mark spoke, his voice like a blade. Since the moment you picked up a cast-iron pan and ended your husband's life. Since you buried him beneath your daughter's feet. Martha's eyes flicked briefly to Carol and Anna. The flicker vanished as quickly as it came. Julian wasn't the saint you all think he was. Richard raised an eyebrow. Explain. Martha's voice flattened, each word cold, calculated. When we first married, Julian was gentle, kind, but that changed. He started controlling everything. Who I spoke to, what I wore. I quit my job because he said I dressed too flashy. I cut off my friends because he said they were bad influences. Mark cut in. Do you have any medical records? Any documentation of abuse? No, Martha snapped, because I didn't think to report the man I once loved. I thought I could endure it. For Anna. Rose raised a hand, holding a folder. According to Julian's therapist, Dr. Fred Sanders, you were the one exhibiting controlling behavior. He wrote, and I quote, Julian shows signs of distress from living with a wife who is impulsive, manipulative, and prone to depressive outbursts. He made that up, Martha hissed. Then explain this, Rose continued, flipping a page. A message you sent to your former friend Laura Mitchell. If Julian leaves me, I'll make sure he never leaves anyone again. There's a way to silence someone forever. If you stay cold enough. I was just venting, Martha said, fists clenched. Mark stood and placed an evidence bag on the table. This isn't just venting. He pulled out the murder weapon, the cast-iron pan. Dried blood still stained the rim. Julian's DNA? This pan is what ended his life. Not a text, not an argument. This. Martha lowered her head. But then she looked up, her voice sharper, angrier. Why don't you mention that Julian filed for divorce? That he was trying to take Anna from me? That he wanted to throw me out of the house I helped build? What did you expect us to do? Richard snapped. Pretend that murder is justified because things got hard? Where were your laws, Martha whispered, when I cried every night? When I begged him not to throw me away like trash? Rose's voice turned cold. No one denies your pain, Mrs. Grant. But pain is not a pass for homicide. No suffering justifies burying a body under your kitchen floor. Later, the investigation broadened. Mark called in Laura Mitchell, Martha's former best friend. Laura, a thin woman with curly hair and a distant voice, seemed hesitant as she sat down. We used to be close, she said softly. But Martha had a tendency to demand attention. She was quick to anger. Do you recall anything she said about Julian? Richard asked. Laura paused. She once told me, I hate the way he looks at that girl like she's his alone. If I lose Anna, I have nothing left. I thought it was just jealousy. Rose leaned forward. Do you believe she's capable of murder? Laura fell silent. Then, her voice low, I don't want to believe it. But when I heard Julian had gone missing, I wasn't surprised. I've seen that look in her eyes before. It wasn't sadness. It was the look of someone who's made up their mind. That night, at Carol's home, Anna played quietly with her building blocks. She arranged small plastic bricks into a square, then placed a tiny figure in the center. Carol watched from across the room. What are you building, sweetheart? I'm making a bed, Anna said. For Daddy. Like the one we had before. Carol's breath caught in her throat. Daddy's not there anymore, baby. He's in a better place now. Anna shook her head. No, he's not. He's still cold. I saw him shivering in my dream. Carol moved quickly, pulling the girl into her arms. Your daddy loved you so, so much, she whispered. But now he needs you to be strong. He'll be happy if you're safe and loved. Anna looked up at her grandmother, her voice barely a whisper. Then, does Mommy love me? Carol's breath caught in her throat. She tried to answer, but the words came out broken. Your mom, she did something very wrong, Carol said, fighting to keep her voice steady. But you are not wrong, Anna. You are just a child, and you will be protected. At the detention center, Martha sat in a dim metal chair across from her defense attorney. Victor Anderson was a man in his 50s, with a worn suit, graying hair, and the steely calm of someone used to dealing with the worst in people. He didn't offer a handshake. I'm not here to help you deny the charges, he said bluntly, but I can help you keep some dignity. If you cooperate, if you're honest. Martha let out a bitter breath. Dignity? I buried that with Julian. Victor didn't blink. Maybe, but you still have a choice. What your daughter grows up remembering. You want her to carry your shame or your truth? For a moment, Martha didn't answer, but something in her eyes flickered. The cold wall cracked, not broken, but shifting. A hint of regret surfaced. The next morning, Rose Martin filed the final report to the provincial court judge. Her voice was clear, methodical. Physical evidence, recovered video, digital phone data, witness testimony, and forensic timelines all corroborate. Martha Grant had motive, opportunity, and means. The act was premeditated, followed by cleanup and concealment, and manipulation of a child witness. We request formal charges for first-degree murder with intent, along with charges for unlawful concealment of a corpse and child psychological interference. The judge nodded solemnly. Permission granted. The defendant will remain in detention until the formal trial. Outside the courthouse, Mark stood by the window. Sunlight touched the pavement outside, but it didn't feel warm. To him, the light didn't represent justice, only the raw, unfiltered truth. A man had died believing in love, a child had lost her childhood, and a woman, perhaps once broken, had chosen to break others in turn. In downtown Illinois, the child psychology clinic of Dr. Lucy Bennett sat quietly above a flower shop. A red brick building, modest but warm. Carol held Anna's hand tightly as they entered. Anna hadn't spoken all morning. She simply walked in silence, clutching an old teddy bear, Julian's birthday gift from the year before. A nurse greeted them. Hello, Mrs. Carroll. Can Anna come with me? Carol leaned down and kissed her granddaughter's head. I'll be right outside, sweetheart. Anna turned her face away, but followed without protest. Inside the therapy room, the walls were colorful. Drawings, dolls, picture books. A corner was arranged like a small kitchen playset. Dr. Lucy Bennett, a calm woman in her 40s, sat across from Anna at a child-sized table. She smiled gently. Your name is Anna, right? Anna nodded. Do you like drawing? Anna nodded again, reaching into her small jacket pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and carefully laid it on the table. Lucy unfolded it. The crayon drawing showed a room, a kitchen. A figure lay flat beneath a gray-tiled floor. No face, just a shadowed human shape. Lucy leaned forward. Who is this? That's Daddy, Anna replied quietly. Lucy's eyes softened. What is Daddy doing? Daddy's under the floor, where the new tiles are. He's very cold. Lucy paused, her voice a gentle breeze. Who told you that? I heard it, Anna said. Daddy called me. In my dream, he was shivering. He said, Anna, I'm so cold. Outside the room, Carol sat on a bench beside Chief Mark Rivers. She hasn't said much, Carol whispered, but my granddaughter, she knows. Mark nodded slowly. More than we imagined. I remember asking her once, he said after a pause, "Where's your dad?" And without flinching, she said, "Under the floor." That kind of truth shouldn't belong to a 4-year-old. Carol turned to him, her voice breaking. A child shouldn't have to carry that kind of truth, Chief. Mark looked at the door. I know. Inside, Lucy spoke softly. Anna, who put Daddy under the floor? The girl hesitated, then said it plainly, as if she were recounting a fairy tale. Mommy. Lucy stayed still. What did Mommy do to Daddy? She told him, be quiet. Then she picked up the pan. She hit him hard. Anna looked down. Daddy stopped moving. Lucy quickly jotted the statement down, her heart aching as she watched the child, so small, so calm, so broken in ways no one could see. Dr. Lucy Bennett gently put down her pen. Anna, were you scared? Anna looked down at her lap. Her fingers clutched the fraying edge of her sweater. I wasn't allowed to be scared, she whispered. Mommy said if I told anyone, the whole family would fall apart. Then she cried. I was scared of her crying. Lucy closed her eyes for a moment. This wasn't just trauma. It was buried fear, internalized silence, a child forced to carry an adult's secret like a coffin on her back. Anna hadn't simply witnessed a death. She had lived inside it. Her innocence had been rewritten in whispers and warnings. That night, back at Carol's home, Anna returned from therapy quieter than usual. She didn't eat dinner. Instead, she sat on the living room floor, her teddy bear beside her, and began to draw. Carol approached gently, tiptoeing over. The drawing showed a man standing beside a small girl. In his hand, a balloon. Who's this, sweetheart? Anna looked up, eyes soft. That's Daddy, she said. He's not cold anymore. He has a balloon. Carol couldn't speak. She simply knelt and wrapped her arms around her granddaughter. Later that night, Anna cried in her sleep, calling out between shuddered breaths, Don't leave me, Daddy. Don't let Mommy shut the door. Carol held her close. She didn't sleep a minute. The next morning, Dr. Lucy Bennett arrived at the station at Rose Martin's request. She carried a psychological evaluation, thick with observations and trauma markers. I can't bring Anna in as a formal witness, Lucy began, but her statements are consistent with the physical evidence. She described the layout of the kitchen, the timing, the murder weapon, details no one shared with her. Rose leaned forward. Does she fear her mother? Lucy nodded, slowly. Yes, but not the way you'd expect. It's not fear of pain. It's fear of losing love, of betraying her mother. Children. They often love, even when it hurts them. Mark asked, Can we use her drawings in court? Not legally, Lucy said, but emotionally, they matter. With court approval, I can testify to the psychological. That afternoon, investigative journalist Scott Vincent met with Mark outside the courthouse. Chief Rivers, he began, I've followed the Martha Grant case. I want to write a feature, not a tabloid headline, something real. I won't name the child, but people need to understand how children get trapped in the crimes of adults. Mark considered him carefully. You can use what's public, nothing confidential, and nothing that puts the child through more harm. Scott nodded. I want to call it Dad Under the Kitchen Floor, A Child's Truth. Mark was silent for a long moment, then spoke quietly. Then write it with your heart, not just your pen. Later that evening, at the detention center, Martha received a folder from Victor Anderson. Inside, Anna's psychological report. The girl is in therapy now, Victor said flatly. She still calls you Mommy, but her nights are filled with screaming. He looked Martha in the eye. She says you hit her dad with a pan, that you told her to be quiet. Martha's hands trembled. She remembers? Victor didn't soften. She doesn't just remember. She draws it. Every tile. Every word you said. He dropped the file onto the metal table. What have you left her, Martha? Besides a childhood buried in concrete? Martha bit her lip until it bled, but said nothing. That night, in his office, Mark sat alone. The only light came from a desk lamp, casting long shadows over a stack of Anna's drawings. He flipped through each one. Kitchen floors, shadowy shapes, a pan, a small girl with wide eyes. One drawing stopped him cold. A little girl cried beside a slumped adult figure. In the corner, with wobbly crayon letters, Anna had written, "I miss Daddy." Mark closed his eyes. He picked up his journal and began to write. It's not just adults who carry pain. Sometimes the smallest ones bear the heaviest truths. And more than anyone else, they are the first to name evil, with the most honest voice. Daddy is under the kitchen floor. Days later, Martha Grant was officially indicted. But the investigation wasn't finished. Richard Monroe walked into Mark's office with a thick file from the Central Bank of the state of Illinois. 50 pages, he said. Transactions from the 3 months before Julian's death. He dropped the file on the table. Mark scanned the first few pages, then paused. What's this? Richard tapped a highlighted section. Cash withdrawals, always at 2 a.m., repeated, same location. No stores open then. She claimed she was grocery shopping. Mark leaned forward. She wasn't shopping. No, Richard said. She was paying someone, or buying something. Off the books. Mark's voice dropped. Cross-check it. Every ATM camera, every withdrawal. Let's find out what else she was hiding. Before the floor cracked. 3 hours later, Officer Nathan Rogers returned with a flash drive in hand. I've got something, he told Richard. Surveillance from an ATM 2 blocks from Martha's home. They gathered around the monitor in the precinct. In the footage, time-stamped 2:16 a.m., Martha appeared wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses. She looked over her shoulder, keyed in her PIN, and withdrew over $8,000 in cash. Richard narrowed his eyes. 3 days before Julian went missing. Mark folded his arms. No receipts. No record of spending. Cash in the dead of night. She was preparing for something. Or, Richard said grimly, preparing for a life without Julian. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Rose Martin submitted an official request to the Federal Property Registry. They needed to confirm ownership of the house. The report came back 2 days later. The house belonged entirely to Julian, inherited from his late father, purchased before the marriage, titled only in his name. Martha had no legal claim. Mark reviewed the document. His voice was tight. If Julian filed for divorce, she would lose the house, the child, everything. Rose nodded, her jaw tense. Murder was the only way to keep it all. She exhaled. We need to look deeper into her relationship with Samuel Brooks. Even if he didn't help her, he may have fueled her. Samuel Brooks was summoned again. No coffee, no polite small talk. Just a cold gray room under harsh fluorescent lights. Mark and Rose sat across from him. Rose slid a phone across the table. There are hundreds of messages between you and Martha, she said. In one she says, I'll be free soon. Wait for me. You replied, don't do anything you'll regret. Samuel swallowed hard. I didn't know about the murder. I didn't. But you knew Julian was planning to file for divorce? Mark pressed. Samuel nodded reluctantly. She told me. said he was taking Anna. She was spiraling. I thought she just needed someone. I didn't think. Did she promise you anything? Rose asked sharply. Samuel hesitated, then dropped his gaze. She said if Julian was gone, she'd sell the house, that she needed the money to move to Boston. With me. Mark slammed his hand on the table. So she killed him for the house, then planned to run off and start fresh. With you? Samuel shook his head, trembling. I didn't know it would go that far. I swear, back at the station, Rose issued a formal request, a deep search into digital financial activity, especially cryptocurrency. Officer Nathan returned again later that day, pale. She had a hidden wallet. Transferred nearly $16,000 into it, 5 days after Julian was reported missing. Richard stepped outside and lit a cigarette. Mark followed. She didn't kill in a fit of rage, Richard muttered, exhaling smoke. She planned it. Every detail. Not just planned, Mark said quietly. She used her own daughter. She didn't just kill Julian. She stole Anna's entire childhood. That evening, in the quiet of her living room, Carol sat across from her private attorney, Alan Parker, an old family friend, sharp, experienced, and fiercely loyal. He flipped through the case documents. Do you want to pursue full legal custody? Carol didn't hesitate. It's not about wanting. It's about needing to. I won't let my granddaughter go back to that woman. Not ever. Alan nodded. Normally, custody and criminal cases are separate. But with this level of evidence, we can coordinate. You'll need to testify. Carol met his eyes. I'll do whatever it takes. Anna's safety is the only thing that matters now. 3 days later, the prosecution stood before the presiding judge in a closed pre-trial hearing. Rose Martin was composed, but resolute. We are formally requesting additional charges, she announced. Coercion of a minor. Manipulation of a child's testimony, based on statements, drawings, and the psychological report provided by Dr. Lucy Bennett. She paused, her voice hardening. The defendant threatened her daughter, after committing murder, in order to cover up the crime. The judge leaned forward. Is the psychological impact on the child clear? Rose didn't blink. Your Honor, this child is 4 years old. She has carried a secret most adults would collapse under. She has drawn it, dreamed it, whispered it in therapy while holding a teddy bear. She took a breath. If that isn't harm, I don't know what is. 62, with decades of criminal court experience, entered and took his seat. All rise, the bailiff called. Everyone in the room stood. Judge Harris looked out over the packed courtroom and gave a single nod. You may be seated. The judge opened the session. This is the preliminary hearing for the state versus Martha Grant, charged with the murder of Julian Grant, coercion of a minor, financial fraud, and manipulation of a witness. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the courtroom. The court has also approved special aggravated category classification due to psychological trauma inflicted on a minor and deliberate concealment of the body. Gasps echoed faintly through the gallery. Mark Rivers sat straight-backed, hands folded tightly. Rose Martin reviewed her notes beside him, composed but alert. At the witness table, Dr. Lucy Bennett was called first. She spoke clearly, compassionately. The child, Anna Grant, shows sustained signs of complex trauma. Her memories are consistent. Her drawings reveal a narrative too specific, too accurate, to be implanted or imagined. She exhibits symptoms aligned with child PTSD. But what stands out most, she paused, looking toward Anna in Carol's lap, is her moral clarity, her quiet bravery. She knew something terrible had happened, and still in her own way, told us the truth. Rose stood and asked, "In your professional opinion, did the mother, Martha Grant, inflict emotional harm?" Lucy nodded. She forced her child into silence, made her complicit in the aftermath, and denied her an outlet to process grief. That's not just emotional harm, Your Honor. That's emotional imprisonment. Next, forensic expert Elliot Crane took the stand. He presented the handwriting analysis. "This note," he said, holding it up, reads, "If you leave me, I'll make sure you have no one left to leave." The ink, pressure, and stroke patterns match samples from the defendant. The distinctive looped R and tall ascenders are unique. There is no reasonable doubt. It is her handwriting. Rose turned to the judge. "This note was written 6 weeks before Julian's death. It wasn't rage, it was premeditation." As the hearing progressed, the financial analyst from the state bank testified. The defendant made consistent cash withdrawals between 2 and 3 a.m., all totaling over $22,000. These were not routine expenses. There are no business records to match the claim of startup costs. Furthermore, the funds were moved post-homicide to a crypto wallet with anonymized identifiers. The judge leaned forward. "And the victim's house?" "Fully in his name. Martha Grant had no legal claim to the estate without Julian alive. Near the end of the day, Samuel Brooks was called to testify under subpoena. He looked hollow, nervous. Rose questioned him. "Mr. Brooks, did you or did you not send this message? 'Don't do anything you'll regret'?" "I did," Samuel replied. "She was angry, obsessed. I thought it was about the divorce." "Did she ever promise to sell the house, move to Boston, and start a new life with you?" Samuel swallowed. "Yes, but I didn't think she'd actually—" Rose's voice was cool. "But she did. And you concealed information after the fact." Samuel nodded, ashamed. "Yes." Finally, the judge turned to Martha. "You may speak, Mrs. Grant." Her lawyer nodded slightly, giving her the floor. Martha stood. Her voice was calm, cold. "I never planned to kill Julian. I was pushed. He wanted to take my child, take everything. I was protecting what was mine." The courtroom remained silent. The judge's face was stone. "You were protecting possession. Not a child. Not a life. Just ownership." Carol held Anna a little tighter. The little girl rested her cheek on Pepo. The judge looked over the stack of drawings Lucy had submitted, each one colored by a child carrying a truth no adult could bear. He said clearly, firmly, "This court finds sufficient grounds for trial on all charges. The hearing is closed. The trial date will be set within 30 days. The gavel struck. Bang! Martha flinched for the first time. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Mark and Rose exited quickly, avoiding questions. Inside the car, Anna sat in Carol's lap. She looked out the window and whispered, "Daddy's not under the floor anymore." Carol kissed her forehead. "No, sweetheart, he's in the light now." Anna held Pepo closer. "And I told the truth, so he won't be forgotten." Carol closed her eyes, trying not to cry. "No, he never will be." In accordance with the laws of the state of Illinois, and given the severity of psychological damage inflicted upon a minor and the deliberate nature of the homicide, this court sentences the defendant to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. A sharp gasp echoed from somewhere in the gallery. Martha didn't flinch. She just closed her eyes. Judge Harris looked at her one last time. Justice is not vengeance, but it is clarity. And today, clarity has spoken. He struck the gavel one final time. Bang! The trial was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters buzzed with the energy of a nation watching. But within the building, time slowed. Mark Rivers turned to Rose, his jaw tight. "We did right by Julian. And by Anna." Rose nodded, her eyes red but unyielding. "She'll never forget. But maybe she can begin to heal." Richard approached Carol, who clutched Anna in her arms. "She's free now," Carol said, her voice almost a whisper. "Not from pain, but from silence." Anna looked up at her grandmother. "Can we go now?" "Yes, baby," Carol smiled through her tears. "Let's go home." 6 months later, a quiet spring afternoon in a modest house outside Chicago. Anna sat in her new room, light-filled, full of stuffed animals and storybooks. On her wall hung a framed drawing, the one she had made during therapy. But now, a new drawing sat beside it. A sunny field, a swing, and a man with a kind smile pushing her into the air. "Daddy," she whispered. "I remembered." Dr. Lucy Bennett watched from the doorway, having come for a routine visit. "She's making peace," Carol said softly. Lucy nodded. "She's starting to rewrite her memory. On her terms." Meanwhile, at State Correctional Facility for Women, Martha Grant sat in silence, staring through a narrow window. No visits, no letters. In her cell, she kept only one thing: a photo of Anna, taken before it all. In it, Anna held her teddy bear, smiling with milk on her chin. She looked at it every night, not to remember what she had, but what she'd lost. At Julian's grave, nestled under a sprawling oak, Carol knelt with Anna beside her. The grave read, "Julian Grant, beloved father. Quiet strength. Forever remembered." Anna placed a flower on the soil. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm okay now." Carol held her hand. "You made sure he wasn't forgotten," she said. Anna smiled. "Number I made sure he was found."